Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Essays on the Gita, with our beloved Ranga. We are still in Kurukshetra, page 44 in my book, beginning with the line, all which seems to show, etc. We can have a brief summary of the past two paragraphs?
I suppose so.
Very good, yes.
As we have discussed this chapter, Kurukshetra, and the earlier one, which is Kurukshetra is the first one. Then two more chapters on the problem of violence and ahimsa, violence. So, this is a problem that confuses many people. How can Sri Krishna advise Arjuna to resort to killing? It's a sin. How can he do that? So this is the problem being discussed. So he reminds you that the divine uses destruction and construction. Both are equal principles in the physical world. We associate destruction with pejorative meaning and content and intent, because we do it with hate, rancor, anger, and these things. But if a work requires to be destroyed, and we can do it with absolutely no emotion at all, and it is something necessary, then there is nothing wrong in violence. That's what Surendra is pointing out, that it depends on how, with what attitude and under what circumstances you do. But there are people who say ahimsa is a fundamental principle applicable at all times and everywhere. This is not true. This is exactly what he is explaining in these three chapters dealing with this. The first chapter is Kurukshetra. We are about to finish it. Then he goes on to man and the battle of life. And then finally, one more chapter, the creed of the Aryan fighter, the Kshatriya's principle. So, it requires a lot of details we have gone into. He has described how some things, even passivity, wrongly used, can create even more violence. He has told you that it can create, when you say that I will not resist the enemy and I will remain passive and I will not offer a violent defense of myself, you are doing more harm and creating more violence in the physical world, because the opponent will increase his violence against you to make sure that he wins. So, at an individual level, ahimsa may be sometimes applicable and valid, but not in all circumstances, and certainly not as a general principle. In human nature, it is not a general principle. That is what he has been saying. So let's read the text that we have to read today. So, essentially, to sum it all up, violence and ahimsa, violence is not necessarily something negative, number one. Ahimsa is not a universally accepted principle of good. It is not necessarily so. Okay, sometimes it can have the opposite effect, as Surendra pointed out here. All of which seems to, I'm reading the text, all of which seems to show that here is an element in existence, perhaps the initial element, which we do not know how to conquer, either because it cannot be conquered or because we have not yet looked at it with strong and impartial gaze so as to recognize it calmly and fairly and know what it is. We must look existence in the face if our aim is to arrive at a right solution, whatever that solution may be. And to look existence in the face is to look God in the face, for the two cannot be separated, nor the responsibility for the laws of world existence be shifted away from Him who created them and from that which constituted it. Yet Here too, we love to palliate and equivocate. We erect a God of love and mercy, a God of good, a God just, righteous, and virtuous according to our own moral conceptions of justice, virtue, and righteousness, and all the rest we say is not He or is not His, but was made by some diabolical power which He suffered for some reason to work out its wicked will, or by some dark Ahriman counterbalancing our gracious Ormuzd, or was even the fault of selfish and sinful man who has spoilt what was made originally perfect by God. Okay? As if man had created the law of death and devouring in the animal world, or that tremendous process by which nature creates indeed and preserves, but in the same step and by the same inextricable action slays and destroys. It is only a few religions which have had the courage to say without any reserve, like the Indian, that this enigmatic world power is one deity, one trinity, to lift up the image of the force that acts in the world in the figure not only of the beneficent Durga, but of the terrible Kali in her blood-stained dance of destruction, and to say, this too is the mother, this also know to be God. This too, if thou hast the strength, adore. And it is significant that the religion which has had this unflinching honesty and tremendous courage has succeeded in creating a profound and widespread spirituality such as no other can parallel. For truth is the foundation of real spirituality and courage is its soul. Tasyai satyam ayatanam is ending with a Sanskrit quote. So, what he's saying is very clear, but we will go sentence by sentence and have a look at it. The idea that there is good in the world and there is evil in the world not created by God is something that the Vedanta does not agree with. That's basically the message of what he's saying. Both are being created by the divine, or rather seems to be being created by the divine, and the evil that you see, there's an explanation for it. Okay? We might touch upon that when we come to it. So all the arguments that he has given and all the details that we have discussed, all which seems to show that here is an element in existence, perhaps the initial element, which we do not know how to conquer either because it cannot be conquered, or because we have not looked at it with a strong and impartial gaze so as to recognize it calmly and fairly and know what it is. So what is this he's talking about? Force, violence. So now all of it seems to show that here is an element in existence. What is an element? Destruction, force, which we interpret normally as something negative, pejorative. Okay? Perhaps the initial element, it is going right up to God. God is the initial element. Maybe He is initiating this violence. In fact, it is true, because in the Indian conception, the Trinity, he is talking of the Trinity later on, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Brahma is creating, Shiva is destroying instantaneously, and again there is creation instantaneously. So it's a cycle of creation, destruction, but without any gap. And therefore, it is Vishnu who seems to preserve the status quo. So you don't see the gap. If there was a gap between the destruction and the construction, you would see that both are there. But if they are simultaneous, you can't see the difference between them. So that is the truth that he is hinting at here. The initial element, force and non-force if you want, silence and force always go together. They are not two opposite things. They are involved in each other. Another experience also you given. The sea can be absolutely calm and without movement. On some days you will see the sea is absolutely calm, not even a single wave. There are other times where it's in storm and the violence, the sea is in violence. This is exactly the principle in the physical world also. Force and silence. No, the gentleness if you want, okay, the non-violence. Same day using the words, we'll come to that. Mercy, gentleness, sweetness, all these seem to be the opposite of violence. Both exist in the world. And we have to look at it very courageously and not start with preconceived ideas. Violence is bad and non-violence is good. We have to get rid of this. You have to have the courage to admit that these initial ideas are wrong. Okay? All of which seems to suggest that there is an element in existence. The element he is talking of is the force and destruction. Perhaps the initial element, he is using the word perhaps, he is just suggesting to you. It's starting right from the top. Okay? Which we do not know how to conquer, either because it cannot be conquered or because we have not looked at it with a strong and impartial gaze so as to recognize it calmly and fairly and know what it is. This is what he's saying. We have to know. The solution to every problem that you have lies in first looking at the problem very, very detached manner, and then you will know its nature and its weaknesses, and then you will be able to tackle the problem. If you don't know what your enemy is, how will you ever conquer him? So that's what he's pointing out, that we have not looked at the problem with sufficient detachment and calmness. Or because we have not looked at it with a strong and impartial gaze. Now, impartial gaze, Sremda is saying, is strong. Normally you would say that a violent reaction is strong. He is telling you exactly the opposite. A very calm look, absolutely without any disturbance, is a strength. Okay? When you are disturbed, you can't take a right decision. So that's not the strength. The strength lies in calmness. With a strong and impartial gaze, so as to recognize it calmly and fairly and know what it is. And what do we do for that? We must look existence in the face if our aim is to arrive at a right solution, whatever that solution may be. And to look existence in the face is to look God in the face, because existence is a cosmos and God also has created the cosmos. So therefore looking objectively at the cosmos implies looking into the face of God. That's what he says. For the two cannot be separated, nor the responsibility for the laws of world existence be shifted away from him who created them and from that which it constituted it. So, this argument is valid if you are starting from the Advaita philosophy. There is only one ultimate reality. There are other theories which negate this. The Christian theory, the Islamic theory, and there is Manichaean theory, even the Zoroastrian philosophy, he has mentioned that earlier. He is mentioning that all of these are always positing a divine and an anti-divine force. All these so-called negative things in the physical world are created by the anti-divine forces. This the Advaita does not believe in. Even what you think is evil, ignorance, suffering is another problem. It is also, the divine is the origin of all these things. We have to explain this, and since the question has come up and some are not familiar with it, we just mentioned that God is not creating evil. He is not creating the negative things in the physical world at our level, what we see. It is our instrumentation through which we are looking at the universe. We are looking at the universe through broken specks. If I am seeing the physical world through broken specks, the view will be broken. I am seeing the multiplicity. But if my instrumentation, I don't use broken specs, but I see with a clear lens, I will see something else altogether. So the problem is the ignorance. The problem is not the evil in the world. It is ignorance that seems to create the evil in the world and destruction. Okay? Yet, here too, we love to palliate and equivocate. To palliate, the word palliate means to give a temporary relief. Okay? It's used in medicine normally in these problems. So, and equivocate and double speak. We say, oh, yeah, the divine has not created, yet something is there. Maybe he is tolerating the anti-divine forces. Why should he tolerate the anti-divine forces? He is everything. So, there are philosophies which say that there are two basic forces. The Advaita philosophy does not believe in that.
But all of these philosophies that we've encountered before, these people had not risen to the next highest plane.
No. They are using their mind.
Exactly.
Whereas if you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness and look very, very carefully, even then sometimes you can come to the conclusion that evil and good are really at the same plane. They are not different from each other. Both have to be transcended in the spiritual planes. But the real solution comes at the third level in the supramental plane. Okay? He's saying here, and yet we love to palliate and equivocate. Equivocate is double speak. We are meaning one thing, saying something else, using words which can be interpreted two ways. That's equivocation. Okay? So, we erect a God of love and mercy, a God of good, a God just, righteous, and virtuous, according to our own moral conceptions of justice, virtue, and righteousness. And all the rest we say is not he or is not his, but was made by some diabolical power which he suffered for some reason to work out its wicked will, or by some dark Ahriman counterbalancing our gracious Ormuzd. These two words, Ahriman and Ormuzd, belong to the Zoroastrian philosophy. Ahriman is the dark and the gracious is the Ormuzd. So, there is also another theory, Manichaean theory. Mani was a philosopher in Persia in around 300 BC. I think it was BC. And he also had the same idea that the world is, there is an upper layer which is good and a lower layer which is not so good as we think, created by the devil. Or was even the fault of selfish and sinful man who has spoilt what was made originally perfect by God. So I'm not sure exactly what he is referring to, but man has made a mess of things.
I would say it's the Judeo-Christian religions
I think so.
that have attributed this.
Yes. It's man who has ruined the...
Yeah.
He is a sinner and he is...
And therefore suffering is necessary.
Yes.
Yeah. They don't have that idea of the divine grace being able to counter everything.
Okay. As if man, now Surendra is countering that idea, as if man had created the law of death and devouring in the animal world, or that tremendous process by which nature creates indeed and preserves, but in the same step and by the same inextricable action slays and destroys. So you can see that this is happening in the physical world. Physical, at the animal level, at the human level, always this strife and war is a principle that cannot be got rid of. At the physical level, there is destruction, there are earthquakes, there are volcanoes, there are tsunamis, there are floods, there is destruction. But each of them, if you look carefully, you will see that it is not producing only evil. Take a forest fire. It removes all the extra unnecessary weeds and there is growth again. Okay? Or take a flood. The alluvial soil comes and fertilizes the terrain. So there also there is a good. Then take the volcano. It destroys, but all this lava goes into the sea and creates an island, and in 10, 15, 20 years it becomes forested and animals come there. So there is always a regeneration of life. So our idea at the physical level that destruction and is bad and construction is not true. Both go together. Take at the animal level, he himself has said, one animal is pouncing upon another and eating it up. Okay? But it is the destruction that allows the aggressor to live. So life and death go together. Okay? Then you come to the mental level. If you come to the mental level, there is always a war. We may not start, man does fight with spears and weapons, but he can also war with ideas. You want to destroy the opposite idea, that also is there. So it can be subtle destruction also. Okay? So it is there everywhere, that's what he's saying. It is only a few religions which have had the courage to say, without any reserve, like the Indian, that this enigmatic world power is one deity, one trinity, to lift up the image of the force that acts in the world in the figure not only of the beneficent Durga, but of the terrible Kali in her blood-stained dance of destruction, and to say, this too is the mother, this also know to be God, this too, if thou hast the strength, adore. So, Srendra has that hymn to Durga. Okay? Now the Durga, we know that the divine manifests in 4 different ways. Knowledge, force, then production and wealth, and humility and service. Corresponding to the Brahmana, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya and the Shudra. So there is also the he is referring here to the Trinity. The Trinity, he is talking of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Brahma is creating, Shiva is destroying instantaneously, and Vishnu is maintaining the status quo. There seems to be continuously something that is there, but actually there is a constant destruction and a construction. Constant destruction, construction. Okay, so, but it's very interesting. I have not found, I don't know which religion he is talking of, which also says this. He's saying only a few religions. So if anybody has got the idea of which religions say this, I would be interested to know. Hinduism, yes. But what are the other religions that say this? I don't know. Maybe the Tantric, I don't know. Because Tantric is not Advaita. Durga has 2 aspects. One of destruction and one of beneficent. She is in the mother, Srendra has very interestingly spoken about the Mahakali aspect. He says her hand is uplifted to strike but also to help, to succor. So this is the aspect of Kali and Durga. And it is significant that the religion which has had this unflinching honesty and tremendous courage has succeeded in creating a profound and widespread spirituality such as no other can parallel. For truth is the foundation of real spirituality and courage is its soul. Tasya satyam ayatanam. This statement is being made not out of pride but as a statement of fact. He has also said in a letter to Dilip Kumar Roy, after all, India has done 100 times more in the spiritual field than Europe has. These are the words he has used. So it's true, because not only one philosophy, any number of religions, any approaches to God, every possible approach that you can think of has been adopted and tried out in India. because there was so much of tolerance and there was so much of freedom. So it's not only Advaita philosophy that dominates the Indian scene, but so many other small religions, okay? And the sects are innumerable. Innumerable sects. So not only all the religions, and it's a very interesting fact that in India you have all the religions are represented. I don't know if all the countries have this. All the religions are existing in India. Whether it be Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, even the latest one, that Baha'i religion, all these exist in India. Okay, so all this, now he is going to put the whole thing in proper perspective, because you might get the impression that Sri Aurobindo is justifying violence and destruction. All this is not to say that strife and destruction are the alpha and omega of existence, that harmony is not greater than war, love more the manifest divine than death, or that we must not move towards the replacement of physical force by soul force, of war by peace, of strife by union, of devouring by love, of egoism by universality, of death by immortal life. God is not only the destroyer, but the friend of creatures, not only the cosmic trinity, but the transcendent. The terrible Kali is also the loving and beneficent mother. The Lord of Kurukshetra is the divine comrade and charioteer, the attractor of beings, incarnate Krishna, and whithersoever he is driving through all the strife and clash and confusion, to whatever goal or Godhead he may be attracting us, it is, no doubt of that, to some transcendence of all these aspects upon which we have been so firmly insisting. We have been so firmly insisting, he is talking of himself. Okay? We have to ultimately go to the transcendent consciousness. He is stressing that all the time. We like to say there are 3 levels. Level 1, our normal, ignorant state, our identification with body, mind, life, and seeing the many and thinking it to be real. That's level 1. Level 2, you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, your soul escapes from the prison house of body, mind, life, and you start seeing the oneness more than the many. Still, that also is not the perfect. You have to go to the 3rd level, where this oneness and the many are both harmonized and fused, and there is no opposition at all. So that's what he is insisting on. We have been so firmly insisting. But where, how, with what kind of transcendence, under what conditions, this we have to discover. And to discover it, the first necessity is to see the world as it is, to observe and value rightly his action as it reveals itself at the start and now. So again he is talking of the start. He has said earlier, you remember, he has said, use the word initial. So maybe this double destruction and construction, destruction and creation is initial element. Maybe it's going right up to there, and it does go right up to there, because Shakti is there, one of the elements in Satchidananda. And to discover it, the first necessity is to see the world as it is, to observe and value rightly his action as it reveals itself at the start and now. Afterwards, the way and the goal will better reveal themselves. We must acknowledge Kurukshetra. We must submit to the law of life by death before we can find our way to the life immortal. We must open our eyes with a less appalled gaze than Arjuna's to the vision of our Lord of time and death and cease to deny, hate, or recoil from the universal destroyer. The gist of what he's saying here is, so long as man is ignorant and is living in the ignorance, the problem of destruction, himsa, violence used in the wrong way, can never be conquered. Never. So only when you go to a higher spiritual level and men become more spiritual, then the problem can be solved. He says the same thing about the French Revolution. Égalité, fraternité, liberté, égalité, fraternité. He says fraternity is not a mental concept. It's a spiritual concept. So to have real fraternity, today I may be very friendly with you and I say, oh, you are my brother. Tomorrow there will be a difference of opinion and I'll quarrel with you. So only when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, then that doesn't happen, because you are seeing the real thing. That's what he's saying. So another 2 more chapters on the problem of ahimsa. There is a big problem in the Gita, no? So that's what he is discussing. 3 chapters on the problem. Man and the battle of life. Man can progress only when he uses the force to kill the evil in himself, to kill his past and progress to the future. You have to use destruction. Bad habits have to be destroyed. Your past and your limitations have to be destroyed. So destruction is very necessary for progress. Let's stop here today.
Namaste all.